Support for this episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is made possible by the Wessex Press, the premier publisher of books about Sherlock Holmes and his world. Find them online at wessexpress.com. And the Baker Street Journal, the leading publication of Sherlockian scholarship since 1946. Subscriptions available at bakerstreetjournal.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 140, Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Elusive Ear.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became astronomer.
In a world where it's always 1895, comes I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we discuss goings-on in the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, the Baker Street irregulars, and popular culture related to the great detective.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Burt Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
Well, welcome once again to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
And I'm Burt Wolder.
And, you know, I feel responsible, Burt. We told people that episode 140 would be all about tobacco and ashes, since there are 140 varieties mentioned in the canon. And I thought, canonical number, we can tie that to this episode. Well, I had to look at the fine print of our contract. There's no smoking allowed on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Oh, that's very good. Well, now I can get rid of, this pile of Cavendish and this ounce of Perique that I've got stuck into my house slipper. So actually, I'm glad about that. I'm going to be more comfortable in just a few moments.
Okay, well, good. And I guess, I was going to try and come at it from another direction, but it kind of looks silly now to have this spittoon in my office. So,
the real problem about keeping tobacco in the toe end of a person's slipper is that your toenails really develop a nicotine stain. It's really kind of repulsive, to most people who have the misfortune of actually seeing your naked feet.
Good Lord. Nobody wants to see that. But you know what we do want to see? We want to see comments. We want to see your feedback about how we're doing on this show. Leave us a rating or review on the podcast listening device of your choice or the platform of your choice. Send us an email at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. Hit us up on the socials. We are I Hear of Sherlock on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you would like the show notes for this particular episode, you can find them at ihose.co/ihose140. That's ihose.co/ihose140, all lowercase. And, feel free to support us financially. There is a section at the end of the show called Canonical Couplets, a little quiz that is available only for our supporters. So if you would like to donate as little as $1 an episode, we'd be proud and glad to accept that to help defray the expenses of producing the show. And there you have that. Well, in the meantime, why don't you hop on over to the ancient kingdom, the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdom, I guess, of Wessex.
Here in the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex, we are preparing our traditional St. Patrick's Day festival. Each year, we arm our citizens to combat witches and druids, and then turn all our walking sticks into trees. We love honoring history. And that's why you need your copy of 70 Years by Gaslamp, the illustrious client's 6th casebook, edited by Mary Ann Bradley, Louise Haskell, and Melanie Hoffman. Its 257 pages span 70 years of the history of the illustrious clients of Indianapolis, and it's available right now from our wesexpress.com. Friends, it's March. Dear March, how are you? And the rest, did you leave nature well? Oh, March, come right upstairs with me. I have so much to tell. If she could, even Emily Dickinson would reach for the pleasure only a volume from the West Express can provide. Choose yours today.
Oh, those happy Wessexians. It's been a big issue over there what to call themselves. You know, for a while it was Wessexians, but I don't think everybody liked that, particularly the vicar. I don't think he was.
That's in the same category as our tobacco contract language. You don't want that. David MacGregor is a playwright and screenwriter, and he is a resident artist at Jeff Daniels' Purple Rose Theater right here in Michigan, where I am. And that's where 5 of his plays have already been produced. And, of course, we're here to talk with him about his newest play, Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Elusive Ear, which will premiere at the Purple Rose in just a few weeks. And his drama Conversion is actually going to premiere later this year in Melbourne, Australia. David's been nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in Drama, and his plays have been performed from New York to Tasmania. He wrote the screenplay for the award-winning dark comedy Vino Veritas, which stars Emmy winner Kerry Preston, and his screenplay In the Land of Fire and Ice was a 2016 Athena List winner for Best Screenplays featuring female protagonists. He teaches film and writing at Wayne State University in Detroit, and he is our guest today. David MacGregor, welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Well, we didn't have a choice. We invited you.
Okay, fair enough.
Why don't we begin at the beginning, and how about you tell us how you first met Sherlock Holmes?
That was just back when I was a kid. My brother and I got in this habit of when there were book sales, on the last day of the book sale, they would have what they called a bag day, where you could buy a big brown paper grocery bag for $1 and then fill it with as many books as you wanted, because they were just trying to get rid of as many books as possible at that point. And we would just cruise around throwing anything that looked interesting into the bag. And then our process was, when we got home, one by one, we would pull the books out of the bag, read the first sentence aloud, and based on that, decide if it was worth reading or not. Huh. So, very sophisticated process. So, H.G. Wells was a keeper, John Updike not so much. And on one of those excursions, one of the books we picked up was the complete double-day Sherlock Holmes, and I started reading that, and I thought, man, it's just great. I'd always liked Victorian literature to begin with, that period, the kind of formality of the language. And, from that point on, whenever I had a chance to catch anything Sherlock Holmesy on TV, whether it was a Basil Rathbone film or a TV show, or certainly when the Jeremy Brett series aired on PBS, I would check it out. And I just always liked the character and the whole idea of trying to create order out of chaos or presume that there's some kind of structure in the universe. It's a pleasing delusion at the very least. So that's what I liked about it.
Oh, fair enough. Now, when did your pull towards the stage occur?
I had been writing, actually, when I got out of college, I was kind of curious to see if I could get people to give me money for writing. So I wrote up a couple of short mystery stories. There used to be an old pulp magazine called Mike Shane Mystery Magazine, and I actually sold a couple of stories to them. In fact, one of them was a Sherlock Holmes pastiche. And then I kind of figured out I liked screenwriting, I liked movies, and unfortunately I never moved to California. So because I live in Michigan, I would tend to have people, they would option scripts or buy scripts, but it's a tough thing to get a movie made. And then I heard, there was a bunch of local theaters, and some of them had one-act festivals, and I heard about this one-act festival, and I sent in a play, and they said, we're going to do it. Would you like to direct it? And I said, yeah. And I realized it was, a lot more practical and viable to get more plays produced than movies produced, at least where I was. And just kind of proceeded on that basis, Theater is very writer-centered, whereas movies are not so much. In theater, the playwright matters. In movies, not so much. The screenwriter can be replaced or, erased from the project at a moment's notice. So I like that. I like the personal connections and being able to see my work done on a regular basis.
Well, those are good reasons. What did you think when you first sort of centered on the subject of Holmes and Watson? Because it's not everybody that thinks about these relatively static characters as natural for the stage.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this was basically, I had, for whatever reason, probably when I watched the Jeremy Brett series. And everybody was kind of going nuts over it. It's wonderful. It's the best. He's the definitive Sherlock Holmes, et cetera, et cetera. Just like a lot of people were saying about the Benedict Cumberbatch version in Sherlock. And when I read that or heard people saying that, I knew people had said the same thing about Basil Rathbone. And people had said the same thing about William Gillette. And in the back of my mind, I always thought, someone should write a book about this. And so a couple of years ago, I decided I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do this. And it's going to be a huge pain. There's a lot of stuff out there, but I'm just going to keep at it. Actually, it was longer ago than that. And so I started compiling this massive tome. It's called the Sherlock Holmes, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. But, I'm nothing if not compulsive. And I'm keeping at it. And I'd always had this idea for a Sherlock Holmes play. This would be cool. Cool idea. Basically, the idea is Vincent van Gogh commissions Sherlock Holmes to recover his lost ear. They're contemporaries, 1888. It fit. And so I'm working on this book, and I was on the chapter of, Sherlock Holmes in movies, 1900 to 1939. And I'm thinking, I'm feeling pretty good about it. It's looking pretty good. And I thought, I better check the Internet again. You never know. And I came across this database of digitized movie magazines from the early part of the 20th century. And I put in the search term Sherlock, and I came back with 8,000 results. And now I know I've got to go through that. And so I'm going to do this. But then I thought, you know what? I'm already immersed in the world of Sherlock Holmes. I've always wanted to write a play. In the research, I've got to double and triple check everything to make sure it's right. But if it's a play, I can just make it up. And it'll be my vacation from the book. And it'll be fun. It'll be exciting. It'll be funny. And so I did. I mean, I would work on the book during the day, and at night I would work on the play. And it came out really quickly, almost organically. I didn't know exactly where it was going when I started. And it just came together. And I'd already had, as you mentioned in the introduction, a relationship with the Purple Rose Theater. I know the artistic director, and I saw him. I was with him. And he asked me, are you working on something? And I said, yeah. Give me a couple of weeks and I'll send it to you. And he said, what's it about? And I said, it's a Sherlock Holmes play. And he kind of had this strange expression on his face, and he looked at me and he said, like with Sherlock Holmes? I said, yeah, it's a Sherlock Holmes play. And he said, no, wait, what I mean is Sherlock Holmes in the play? I said, yeah, it's a Sherlock Holmes play. And he lit up and he said, dude, I've been looking for a Sherlock Holmes play. So unbeknownst to me, that was the very kind of play that he was looking for. So he read it, he said, we're doing it, and it's in rehearsal right now. I was at rehearsal just yesterday.
So without giving too much away, what can you tell us other than Holmes and Vincent van Gogh? Can you sort of rough out the story at a very high level?
I'll give a little bit away, because I have to give a little bit away. It starts off 221B. What I always liked about the stories, just the setting, Holmes and Watson. And Watson is in distress because, as you find out, they're broke. He's the only one making money selling stories to the Strand magazine. And what's also apparent in the first few minutes of the play is that there's another person who lives with them, who is Mrs. Hudson, but it's not Mrs. Hudson. It's Irene Adler. And Watson has been forced to explain this woman living in their rooms by turning her into the housekeeper. That's why there's the confusion in Scandal in Bohemia. What's the housekeeper's name? He can't keep it straight because he's just making it up. So all that nonsense about Irene Adler dying or late lamented, no. She met Sherlock Holmes. He met her. They fell in love. She moved in. And now it's kind of a Victorian Three's Company. And she's every bit as brilliant as he is, as much of an iconoclast as he is. And they complement each other's skills wonderfully, except, as Watson says, they're broke. He's the only one bringing in money because their last few cases, were about missing cats or someone, lost their jewelry, but it was in their nightgown. And so they need something. They need a Moriarty-type figure, except as Watson says, yeah, that was great, but somebody in this room, and I'm not pointing fingers, someone in this room threw him off a waterfall. So, as Watson says, I'm not saying psychopathic criminals don't have their downside, but they're way more interesting than sleeping pussycats. So they're in dire straits. They need money, at which point Vincent van Gogh shows up in their rooms. He needs help. He's brought a painting with him. He's got his traveling case. He's got a big bloody bandage wrapped around his head and proceeds to tell this tale of woe about how he happened to lose his ear and would Sherlock Holmes help him get it back because it's the only thing he has to offer to the woman he loves. Holmes knows nothing about modern art, so it's a two-act play. The second act consists of Irene Adler goes out, she gets a Lautrec, she gets a Gauguin. They're going to educate themselves on postmodernistic art. Watson is friends with Oscar Wilde. And as I'm sure you guys know, Arthur Conan Doyle had a very famous meal with Oscar Wilde at the Langham Hotel in London. So he brings back Oscar Wilde. And Oscar Wilde proceeds to educate them about the world of modern art. And the thing I'll get cagey about is there is a beautiful, dangerous femme fatale who shows up as well.
Oh, boy.
Let me just say this. I've got beautiful women in corsets sword fighting on stage. So,
wow.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
This really sounds great. There's so much, as you know, particularly when you think about Sherlock Holmes, Hero of a Thousand Faces, so much has been done and redone and retread, but this is completely original. This sounds like a real hoot.
It's a comedy, action, adventure, mystery, romance. Yes, it's multi-genre. And, what I like about it is really this. If he was a real person, because I tend to know a lot of strange, troubled, eccentric, idiosyncratic people. And for most of them, they gave up on the idea of any kind of romance, any kind of partnership, girlfriend, boyfriend, marriage, about when they were 12 or 13. I'm too strange. I'm too weird. It ain't going to work. I'm going to focus on what I want to focus on. It's impossible for me. And some of them end up, like Isaac Newton was a virgin his whole life, which is a good thing to be if you want to focus on your work, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't have all those distractions. So when someone like that actually meets someone who's on the same wavelength as them, it's not just attraction. It's incredible gratitude and relief. It's like, I can't believe this has happened to me. So he is Sherlock Holmes madly in love with someone who is madly in love with him. And it's Irene Adler. So it's a little, as the movie boys say, it's uniquely generic. It's generic that you've seen it 1,000 times before, but it's unique. You've never seen this particular incarnation before.
So
and there's plenty of absinthe, too, just to help things move along.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, absinthe makes the heart grow fonder.
Yes. Yes. And it's a nice green beverage to have on stage. It's that real pop of color that you need. So, and there's also the finding the missing ear, but the kind of larger mystery is this. Like a guy like Van Gogh, he sold one painting during his lifetime. And at this point in his life, he had sold 0. So as Sherlock Holmes kind of figures out, there is a vast conspiracy afoot against the Impressionists. There's some malevolent intelligence, Moriarty-like.
Well, and that has big historical echoes, because there were a lot of people who felt threatened in various ways by the Impressionist movement. That's fascinating. That's grand. Oh boy, I got to go to Michigan to see this.
You should. Well, trust me. Come out. I'll get you a comp ticket. And I will tell you the one hazard with this theater, and it's a great thing for me, is that they do 7 preview performances, which means after the play, the audience can stick around and talk to me and the director and say, here's what I liked, here's what I found confusing. And I know there's going to be some Sherlock Holmes gurus in the audience who are going to say, well, actually, the Strand magazine didn't begin publication until 1891, et cetera, et cetera. But as Arthur Conan Doyle himself said, sometimes one has to be masterful. So I had to fudge some of the details.
So did you have fun in casting the roles? Have you found a very Holmesian Holmes? We have a
incredibly Holmesian Holmes. He's magnificent. He is tall, lank. He's a great actor. Our Watson is a Chicago actor. Our Femme Fatale is a Chicago actor. They are all absolutely top-notch. I mean, because we were watching the other night, the woman who plays Irene Adler was in a movie with Robert De Niro. And so we were watching the movie that she's in with Robert De Niro. So it's a first-class cast all around. And the director is the best director I've ever worked with. He's directed all my premieres of The Purple Rose, and he is instinctive, and I don't have to explain things, and he's just a wonderful collaborator to work with.
What was your experience bringing the Baker Street set to life? We've talked to other people, academics, performers over the years, and there's so much that goes into the Baker Street scene. Things that people expect, that old Victorian milieu. Was that fun working with the set designer?
Well, all I do is I write the script. I put it on the page, and the designers. This is like a designer's dream play. If you are into set design, if you're into costume design, they are so happy. It's not kitchen table sink, right? It's the rooms of Sherlock Holmes, which are iconic. And the costumes are, obviously late Victorian costumes, and they are, maniacal about detail. At one point we were talking about having cuffs on the pants, and the costume designer immediately said, no, there were no cuffs on pants in 1888, That didn't come till the early 1900s, so we can't do that. So that's what I like working with The Purple Rose is just everybody is incredibly talented, incredibly passionate, everybody brings their A game, and that's the beauty of it. It's a collaborative enterprise that we're just trying to create something really, really cool for the audience.
So how big is the cast? How many parts are there?
Well, there's 6. There's
6.
Sherlock Holmes. Yeah,
great.
Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, Irene Adler.
So this could have legs. I mean, in terms of traveling and being easy for other people to mount, and which I assume is not accidental.
Well, we'll see. I mean, right now the trend in theater is we want something that's one act, 75 minutes long with 2 people. That's the hot ticket item these days because it's quick, it's economical to produce with a small cast. But I think, this hopefully, I do intend on trying to get it published after it premieres and I get some reviews. Hopefully it does have some legs,
Wonderful.
Well, I know local Sherlockians here in Michigan, the Amateur Mendicant Society and the Ribston Pippins are all trying to get groups together to head out there. The play premieres on March 29th and runs...
Well, that's actually the previews.
That's previews.
Start on the 29th. Yeah, it opens officially on April 6th.
April 6th, okay. And it runs through...
May 26th.
May 26th, okay.
So it's a good, long, would that be 8-week run?
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
And
I will definitely.
It's an amazing little theater, too. Seats 168. It's this little jewel of a theater 15 minutes west of Ann Arbor.
Tell us about the Purple Rose, not only the theater, but the theater company as well.
It was founded a little over 25 years ago by the actor Jeff Daniels, who was committed to providing opportunities for people in Michigan, artists in Michigan, actors, writers, designers, to have a place to ply their trade. And it started off pretty small, pretty ambitious, but the fact that it's around more than 25 years later kind of speaks to how successful it's been. It's a great place for anybody in the theater field to work at, and everybody loves working there.
And the name, I expect, because of Jeff Daniels, goes back to the film, The Purple Rose of Cairo, where he played an actor in a film who actually leaves the screen and walks around in the real world. It's a great picture.
Yeah, well, he always felt that was the film that kind of moved him from bit actor to star, or like a major career move, and he was always grateful for that role. And so, yeah, that's where Purple Rose comes from.
Now, how long have you been affiliated with the Purple Rose?
They did the first play of mine they did was in 2006.
Okay.
So,
and which one was that?
12 years. They did a play of mine that had actually premiered on the West Coast. It was called The Late, Great Henry Boyle, which was about a professor of medieval English who's kind of losing his mind and starts to hallucinate giant rodents, et cetera.
Oh.
And they'd heard about it, and they called me up, and they said, "We heard you had a play produced in California." I said, "Yeah." And they said, "But you live in Michigan." I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, can we see it?" And I said, "Yeah." So I sent it to them, and then I got a call from the theater. I went out and had lunch with Guy Sanville. He's the artistic director, and with Jeff Daniels, and they said, "We would like to put on your play, and if you want to keep writing, we'd like to keep doing them." So it's worked out really well.
Yeah. Earlier in passing, you mentioned Sir Isaac Newton and his unfortunate situation. But you must have more than just a passing interest in and knowledge of Sir Isaac Newton. Where does that come about?
Well, I just had like normal, regular person knowledge about Isaac Newton, gravity, calculus, things like that. But I can't remember exactly when I saw it, but I was half asleep one night and I watched this documentary on Isaac Newton, and there was this historian who was reading a letter that Isaac Newton had written to the philosopher John Locke. And in the letter, Newton says, "You have endeavored to embroil me with women, and I wish you were dead." And I just kind of sat up and I thought, that doesn't sound like the Isaac Newton I've read about. And so I looked into it, and I found out he had this massive mental breakdown when he was about 50 that everyone tried to cover up. And so I wrote a play about it called Gravity that the Purple Rose ended up doing in 2010. So fascinating guy, Newton. Not the nicest guy in the world, not too many friends, very tormented fellow. Religiously, sexually, really rough childhood. But yeah, he's a fascinating guy. So that's how I'm up on my my Isaac Newton.
Who have been the artists who've had the most influence on you and your work? I mean, you've clearly, read widely, and most people who are successful in this profession acquire, lots of information, think deeply about storytelling. Who've been your big influences? Who's made an impression on you as of other playwrights, other artists like that?
Well, I wouldn't even say it's just limited to playwrights, just writers in general that I've always liked in some way, shape, or form. I mean, like from a play perspective, one of the first plays that I really thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing, was Cyrano de Bergerac. And I thought that was just beautiful. And then I started reading more plays, and I really liked Eugene Ionesco. I really liked Harold Pinter. I really liked a lot of Shakespeare. Some Shakespeare didn't do much for me. And in terms of prose, I always, I liked the Victorian novelists a lot. but I also really like James Joyce. Finnegan's Wake, not so much. That's kind of an ordeal to get through. And there's a Japanese novelist, his name's Yukio Mishima, who committed seppuku in 1970. Fascinating guy, obviously a little bit troubled, but he's the kind of guy who makes me wish I could read Japanese because the translations are just great. Just a terrific, thoughtful writer. And that's what I look for, is like someone that kind of makes me think about things, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. One of the coolest books I ever read was by, he's dead now, a nuclear physicist named Richard Feynman.
Oh, sure.
He wrote a book called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. It's like, it makes you think about things in a way you've never thought about them before, and I always appreciate that, just a really thoughtful viewpoint.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of look for in art.
Yeah, well, Feynman was one of those characters who really had the ability to change the way people viewed the world. He was, among other things, brought in to explain the Challenger disaster and the physics behind what happened there, and gave stunning demonstrations. Oh.
Yeah, well, he basically brought in a glass of cold water.
Yeah, right.
And part of an O-ring. Everyone else is caught up in formulas and this and that, and he just dropped the O-ring particle into the glass of cold water and watched it shrink.
Right.
And it was done.
Yep, there you are. Now, looking at your work, you've got some magnificent titles, but the thing that I really would like to know just a little bit more about is probably one of the best titled works I have ever heard, Scrooge Macbeth.
That was just... there was a play of mine that was performed around the country called Vino Veritas that got made into a movie. And there was a theater company in Fargo, North Dakota, who did it. And I didn't see their production, but they contacted me and said, we're going to try to help develop a new play. Can we do that with you? Is there anything you would like to write? And I just said, okay, I've always wanted to write a holiday play, a comedy. And my idea is a violent collision between everything Shakespeare and everything Christmas. And they said, we're in. And so that's what that is. It's a holiday play in which the basic premise is it's a very ambitious community theater. They're going to do A Winter's Tale by Shakespeare. But opening night, audience showing up, half the cast is in the hospital with food poisoning, and they're doomed. They're doomed. They're already losing money. This is it. The end. Lights out. And they just decide, we got to do something. And they put on this apparently spur-of-the-moment show with whatever costumes they happen to have on hand. And they combine Shakespeare and Christmas. So, for example, the poem The Night Before Christmas becomes, it's done by Othello, and applying, lines from his own life. The Christmas Carol, I'm Getting Nothing for Christmas, because I ain't been nothing but bad, that's sung by Richard III, with his own appropriate lyrics. And it's just a mashup, like I got, the story, is there, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus type of thing.
Yeah.
The little girl who writes a letter to the newspaper, is there really a Santa Claus? And the editor wrote this really beautiful little essay on why Santa is real.
Yes. And
so I just transformed that to, is there really Shakespeare? Because that's been a contentious debate in Shakespearean circles for years. Who is Shakespeare? Was it really a guy named Shakespeare or whatever? So that's what it is. It's a mashup between everything Christmas and everything Shakespeare.
Oh, that's fun.
I love that.
So, yeah, it's my daughter's favorite play of mine. So she loved that. She thought that was great. Unfortunately, it's never been produced in Michigan. It's been produced in Canada and other places in the country, but still awaiting its Michigan premiere. So she saw the Fargo one, but she has yet to see it again. So that's my bucket list.
Christmas is coming.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's what that is, yeah.
Fabulous.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. So of all of your work so far, which one would you say that you are the most proud of or that you have the greatest emotional attachment to?
Well, I mean, that's always hard to answer. It's like, which kid do you like the most?
Yeah.
I really like Vino Veritas. I like what it tries to do, which is it's a play about truth. It's a dark comedy about truth. The kind of things that people know or feel, but you don't want to say it out loud to anybody else because you'll be arrested or people in white coats will take you away until you find out other people think the same thing. Like the last time it was renewed, the Purple Rose did it last year for the second time as their 100th anniversary, their 100th play. And when I was watching the previews, there was quite literally a woman who whooped out loud at one of the parts of the play. And I'd never heard a noise like that in theater before. And I caught up to her after the play, and she was so embarrassed. And, it was when one of the characters was revealing that he and his wife own a photo studio, and they also go to the local megachurch, and they're also atheists. And the other two characters are appalled. Like, how can you go to a church if you're atheist? And they're like, we need the customers. Weddings, baby photos. So what's the problem? And the woman who had whooped was a photographer who goes to the local megachurch, and she's not remotely religious. So it's like, oh, dear. She thought that was her little secret,
There's one in every audience.
Yeah. And, I had another play. It was called Consider the Oyster, that was about a young man just newly engaged. He breaks his leg. The play, just so people know, it's a fairy tale. It starts out with the Detroit Lions winning the Super Bowl, so you know it's a fable. It's not true. It's not remotely plausible. And he breaks his leg, reenacting the winning field goal. And I'd read that doctors, orthopedic surgeons, were using ground-up oyster shell to help repair human bone. Huh. And somewhere back in the dim recesses of my mind, I knew that all oysters are born male, and they change gender. They turn female halfway through their lives. So I just applied that to the play. This guy has his leg fixed with oyster powder. He starts to change gender. He starts to turn into a woman, and not because he wants to. And it's a romantic comedy, and it's really about love, and what do you love in another person, and what happens if that person changes, which happens to most couples in some way, shape, or form. You get older, you get sick, you change religion, some people figure out they're gay, whatever. And so it's a play about love. What do you love about other people? And one of the apprentices at the Purple Rose told me that after one of those performances, he was overhearing a conversation between this middle-aged woman and her group of friends in which she was telling them for the first time that she was gay. That seeing the play had given her the courage or whatever to say, who she really was. And, of course, her friends are her friends. Her friends like, okay, fine, can we go get dessert now? And I like that. I like that a lot, the ability of art to let people know they're not alone. It's not just you. Anything that universalizes human experience, I'm kind of on board with.
I like that. So what do you hope that any atheist photographer, megachurch attending people get out of Sherlock Holmes and the Elusive Ear?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what I feel comfortable with, and I could be, I am wrong on a regular basis. Some plays that I've written, many people like, or they understand, or it touches them or moves them. But by the same token, you get responses like, I'm never coming to this theater again. I've never been so upset or appalled by something this guy wrote. I've had my writing publicly burned, and I have been hung in effigy. And I'm not making that up.
Wow.
So, Sherlock Holmes I don't think there's anything in there that people are going to find too offensive, but that's what the previews will tell you. If there's something that, I think it's pretty fun. I think it's pretty light. We're kind of at a point in time culturally that everything needs to be very heavy and weighty and relevant and meaningful, or it needs to be the opposite. It needs to be more celebratory, more of an entertainment, more here's what we all have in common, as opposed to here's all the differences that are driving us apart.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write something that people could come and see and walk out feeling good. that they had a great time. It was funny. There was action. There was sword fighting. There was people jumping out windows. There was absinthe. And how could you not like a play that has Van Gogh and Oscar Wilde in it? So, that was my goal. I wrote a play I wanted to see. Basically, I wrote a play I wanted to see, and I wanted
the
to
best.
see this.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's how some of the best work gets produced. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, if you're interested in seeing Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Elusive Ear, come to Michigan, playing at the Purple Rose Theater Company in Chelsea, Michigan. Previews begin on March 29th. The play opens officially on April 6th and runs through May 26th. We will have links in the show notes to the theater page and how to purchase tickets. David, before we let you go, what are you working on next?
I am. Well, I currently have 4 screenplays under option, which means people pay me to have the rights to try to put together productions. So I have 4 different groups of people constantly asking me, well, can you touch this up? Can you change this character from Scottish to Irish? So I'm kind of fixing those piecemeal. But honestly, I'm working on the last chapter of that damn Sherlock Holmes book.
Yes.
Sherlock Holmes in the 21st century. And I'm going to finish this unless I drop dead first, which is, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, I have put a lot of time and effort into this, and I hope it's something that Sherlockians and Holmesians appreciate or like. It's about Sherlock Holmes, it's about mysteries, it's about pop culture, and it's tracing the popularity of this character since 1887. So there's a lot of cool material in there that I've never seen anywhere else. I hope it offers something to people that are interested in the character. Yeah. So that's my number one goal right now.
That's great. Well, we'll look forward to having you back to talk about that.
We will have to do that. Have you got a publisher for that yet?
No, not yet. I mean, I mentioned the book when I saw Scott at the Amateur Mendicant Society meeting, and he recommended Wessex Press in Indiana, and so I sent them a couple of the chapters that I had, and we'll see what they have to say. And I don't know at this point, but I'm optimistic that someone somewhere will say, yeah, this would be interesting to enough people to make it worth our while. Yeah. So that's the goal.
Excellent. Well, David, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your really interesting story. It was kind of, it approached Sherlock Holmes from many different angles, and I think that's very satisfying. I hope it is to our listeners as well.
Well, you sound very surprised that it was interesting, so.
We don't like to do too many interesting shows, No. We like, you mentioned earlier being burned in effigy. We don't like any of that. We like, things nobody reacts to. We don't want to change anybody's point of view. We like to lull people into sleep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But for you, we'll make an exception.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I am available for hanging in effigy still. Yeah.
For all your effigy hanging needs.
Exactly. Yes. And most of my plays are published, so people can buy those and burn those as well if need be. So.
Oh well, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure talking to both of you.
What a great conversation. Some things that really stand out to me about what we just talked about with David are, first of all, the reaction people have to his art. We made a light there at the end about burning an effigy and people having strong reaction to his work. But boy, that is a hallmark down through the ages of people who are really making a difference. And what a great conversation, and to find out so many of these points of intersection that seem to recur among people who are really interested in Sherlock Holmes. They read widely, they think of analogies, an experience that Isaac Newton would have over here stimulates their thinking about something else over there. The influences on him, and everything from James Joyce to Japanese authors. It's It's just great to talk to somebody like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hear how so many of the interests can and do, in some cases, intersect back with Sherlock Holmes. I didn't mention it while David was talking, but as he mentioned his play, what was it, Consider the Oyster, I thought about Holmes's rant in The Dying Detective. Shall oysters overrun the world? He said. That whether it was subconsciously or not, you can find these threads that run through the canon, also running through other works. So
yeah. Well, it's very unlikely, actually. I mean, if you speak to people who are deeply experienced and authoritative in marine biology, one of the things you find out is there just isn't enough cocktail sauce in the world for oysters to overrun it.
Well, get to work on that, will you?
I'm trying. I'm mixing. I've got as much ketchup as I can get into the house. I'm working as hard as I can.
Well, this is the portion of the show when we let you compete to win a prize. It is a section we call Canonical Couplets, and we've had some wonderful participation over the past few episodes. And just as a reminder, in order to be eligible to participate and win the Canonical Couplets quiz, all you have to do is be a regular contributor to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, either via PayPal or Patreon. It's as little as $1 an episode. And we will send you something that is of significantly more value than $1 if you should win. All you have to do is be the first one to email us that you have the correct answer, and we get back to you and let you know if you've won or not. Our winner last time around was Chase Abels, and he answered this correctly. When lovely woman to adventure stoops, she turns the wisest of us into dupes. The story referenced in that canonical couplet is, of course, A Scandal in Bohemia. And we've got a prize on its way out to Chase Abels. Now, this time, get yourselves ready. It's the latest canonical couplet. And in this case, we will say, the doctor's skill left much to be desired, and nobody was dying, only tired. If you know the canonical story that comes from, send us an email at comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. And as we said, the first correct answer from a supporter will win a prize.
Very clever.
Yeah, we try. Well, I think we've done it again, have we not?
Oh, it seems like it, yeah.
I know. Well, thank you for sticking with us for this long. We have another great show for you lined up next time on episode 141, another interview, as you've become accustomed. Just join us here at I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. And until next time, my ear remains fixed to my headphones.
I'm hunting around on the floor trying to find my ear right now.
That's pretty elusive. Well, do your best, Burt Wolder.
What? Did you just say something?
What? What?
The game's afoot.
You know, I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.